Hey, folks, good evening, and thank you for joining me on Phantoms Monsters Radio. I welcome all new listeners and members to the channel, as well as first times in the chat. So, tonight, Timothy Renner will join me. He's an illustrator, author, and musician. His illustrations have appeared in the pages of various books, magazines, and fanzines, and as well as comics, as well as many record and CD covers. Since 1995, Timothy has been making music both solo and with his band Stone Breath. Timothy is a creator and co host of Strange Familiars, a podcast concerning the paranormal, weird history, and folklore. Tim currently resides in South Central Pennsylvania, where you might find him wandering in the woods. And Tim is also a member of the Phantoms Monsters Fortean Research team. So, before I go any further, I want to mention that this channel is made possible by clicking on the subscribe and like buttons and by sharing our programming. And if you're watching us on YouTube, super chat and super thanks donations are appreciated. You can click the dollar icon located below the chat box. Other donation links are also shown in the descriptions. Thanks for your consideration. Your comments are always welcome. Tell me which accounts you found interesting in the presentation or suggestions for upcoming shows. I want to again thank our chat moderators, Bernadette, Marla, Thomas, and Mike, as well as I want to thank Kevin and Mary at ESP Network. Now, if you're in the chat and you have a question for Tim, please use all caps, and I'll try to get to each one of them. So, Tim, I'm glad you made it to our show, and we're going to talk about your new book.
Well, hello. Thanks for having me, Lon.
So, why don't you give us a brief description of what this? And it's an interesting book because it's so much different than what I'm used to reading. And but I know you spent a lot of time on this just by what I've seen and what I read.
Oh yeah. I guess it's my first book that's not, paranormal. Although my friend and sometime co-author, not for this book but for other books, Joshua Cutchin, keeps saying it. Well, it's paranormal adjacent, Tim. So there's some paranormal stuff in it, but it's mainly a little. It's biography of hermits. It's called "I've Never Minded the Loneliness: Hermits and Their Stories." And the way it came to me was I was writing the historical Bigfoot books, and in those books, obviously, the term Bigfoot they start using in 1950 through the 70s. really becomes popular in the 70s, but they started using it in the 50s. But if you're looking for Bigfoot accounts in old newspapers, you're basically looking for wild men. They'll call them
Hmm.
wild men. And one day, my wife came in to the office and put a photograph of a hermit in front of me. She said, "He looks like a wild man. You'll like him." And sat it there. And it immediately got shuffled under all my papers, and I forgot about it for about 3 months. And finally, it comes to the top of the pile one day, and I actually had some time. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna look this guy up because it had his name on it. It said Billy Woodruff, Colebrook River, Connecticut. So I looked him up, and his story was amazing. Like this amazing story. And sure enough, like as synchronicity and coincidence goes, not only was he a hermit, but they were having a wild man flap up there in Connecticut. He lived in Colebrook River. The next town over was Winstead. At the time he was a hermit, they're having this wild man flap up there. So one of the accounts I found in the newspapers, he comes walking out of the woods one day, and somebody mistakes him for the wild man because of the way he looked, long hair and big beard and stuff. So here's this first hermit. Like I start researching is actually tied to these wild man accounts that I was researching anyway. Uh, Pretty interesting coincidence. So that got me hooked. I started collecting photographs of these folks, men and women. And after a while, I did a few stories on strange familiars of them, and people seemed to like them. So I said, well, maybe I'll write a book. So it's my first book that's not, strictly paranormal, and it's sort of mini biographies of all these different hermits.
It's very interesting. And in fact, the one account that you did put in there about Herb Thomas, I've heard about him, of course, with
Mm,
Gettysburg in that area. And yeah, that's what I was thinking about when I was reading it. Uh, Back in the day, I wonder how many of these wild men were os- actually mistakenly identified as that, but they were actually Bigfoot or something that looked like a Bigfoot.
I think it went both ways, honestly.
Yeah.
I think sometimes people would see one of these guys in the woods and misidentify it as something wild, and the other way around too. I think probably sometimes somebody saw a real Bigfoot or something, as oh, that's just the old mountain man that lives up there.
Yeah, I think you're right because I know there was at least one incident years back. I don't even know what the date was, but here in Hanover, in this area around here, some wild man apparently got into town somehow, and I don't know if they chased him out, shot him, or what they did, but it was a big thing about that. And if you go back and look at a lot of these descriptions, and of course, your Bigfoot of Pennsylvania book has a lot of those old accounts in there,
Hmm.
and you have to wonder how many of those were actually Bigfoot.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's why, kind of in the introduction of that book, I kind of leave it up to the reader. You
Right.
decide. I think going back over it, because here it is. I think 4 or 5 years since I wrote that book, and I've been going back over it a little bit. There's some accounts that now I probably wouldn't put in there because now they seem definitely more like humans to me.
Mhm.
But most of them in there, 90% plus, I really feel are actual, like something other than humans. They're Bigfoot or whatever they are. But some of them in there are kind of could go either way, I think.
Well, especially in the area where we live in South Central Pennsylvania, and we're both, have lived in Maryland for a number of years, and there just seems to be some type of connection between both those regions as far as Bigfoot. And
Yeah.
I hear a lot of different stories from a lot of different people. They're not very well detailed. I mean, it's a lot of rumor or a lot of third or fourth person accounts.
Hmm.
But when you hear them, you think, yeah, it was probably a Bigfoot, and it
Yeah.
was.
Oh yeah.
So what out of your all the accounts you've got in here, and you got a lot of them in there. How long did it take you to research this thing?
About 3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just
I don't think
because,
I'd ever spend that much time researching a
well,
book.
researching this is different. Like say where the footprints end, the Bigfoot book I wrote with Josh. That's a different kind of research.
Right.
That's more like we'll have a chapter on a theory that Bigfoot. Along with women in white apparitions, say it like that. So then you can do very specific research on those things and kind of look for cases that match that. These were real people, these hermits, and the problem was, I can do newspaper research. I can go to historical societies. Book research. If not a lot of them were in books, but a couple of them were. And at some point, you wonder, like, did I get everything on this person's life?
Right.
And you really never know, And the way I am, I'm kind of a completist. I want to get everything I can, but so at some point, I just had to, both for each individual hermit and for the book in total, I just said, okay, I have to be done. I have to trust that I've gotten everything I could. So, and I'm sure I did, and I'm sure a couple of these folks, there's more information out there, but I did my best.
Yeah, well, you were pretty complete on a lot of them. There's more information about a lot of these people that I'm congratulate you on able to get all that information.
It's
What?
amazing how much is out there, like,
Yeah.
how much you can find on folks.
So, which account is your favorite?
Um, well, the first one I talked about, William Woodruff, just because he's the first, will always have like a special place in my heart. But overall, John Stink, the one they call the Living Ghost,
Okay.
and he was an Osage Indian, and his native name was Hotamoi, and he died and came back to life. So the legend goes, as many as 3 times. But in my research, I found something. It's like 14 different ways that were reported that he had died. So no one can agree how he died, but supposedly he came back, and I say this every time I talk about it. I am doing research from predominantly white newspapers here, and I don't know how accurately this represents Osage culture at all. But
Exactly.
the story goes that he came back and they said, no, the dead are supposed to stay dead, and they could have cast him out. You're an outcast, and they renamed him then John Stink, because the dead do not smell pleasant. Um, so this is in the early 1900s, and he goes off to be a hermit, and he's on the. I have a lot of photos of him on the streets of Pawhuska, Oklahoma, and the thing about John Stink, the interesting thing about him is the Osage on the Osage land they strike oil in the early 1900s, and the Osage people become per capita one of the wealthiest people in the world at that point,
Mm.
including John Stink. They share the wealth amongst the entire tribe. So if you're in the tribe, you get part of it. So he could have afforded to build a mansion. He really could have, but he chose to live outside. He said he liked living outside. So he chooses to live outside, and lives in a tent a lot of the times with his dog. Eventually, he buys some land and puts up some barbed wire just because he wants to be left alone. And they do build a house, but he keeps living outside. He insists on staying outside as much as he can. Super interesting guy, very imposing looking. He's over 6 feet tall. Usually in the photos, usually has a cigar hanging out of his mouth, a knife on his hip. He looks like a very imposing man, but he was very generous. He gave $1,000 to each church around Pawhuska, donations. He gave money. I think he paid tuition for, I don't know how many, like a bunch of Osage girls to go to private school. He just outright paid their tuition. He gave an incredible amount of money to the Osage American Legion hut. He might have been solely responsible for building that. So super generous guy, and a super nice guy who just wanted to live alone. You know.
Mm.
Um, so eventually he falls, breaks his leg, and develops pneumonia in his 70s, and dies once and for all. And the interesting thing, there are ghost stories around Pawhuska about his dogs, but not about him. They say his dogs still haunt the area, and like you can hear him howling at night. But no ghost stories about John Stick that I could find. There may be, in fact, but I couldn't find any. So, but yeah, he became my favorite. I just loved his story. I love the fact that he had enough money to do whatever he wanted, but he chose to live outside. He said, "That's just the way I want to live."
Yeah. When I came to the Hurt Thomas chapter, and I had heard that name before many times, and in fact, and I don't know how much you really covered it. Maybe you did, and I missed it, but um, they're supposedly this guy's ghost somewhere. I guess. Yeah, I mean, I know he was up in Wolf Hill,
Hmm.
which was actually part of the battlefield. Um, but I don't know. I didn't really know a whole lot about him, but you were able to get a good amount of information about him.
Yeah, he sort of appears in the newspapers suddenly, and they talk about this hermit that's living on Wolf Hill on the battlefield, and they said he's the greatest marksman in Pennsylvania with a bow and arrow. So he's living up there, and I was able to track him down. He was married, and he came through um, Baltimore. He was naturalized in Baltimore. He was a German immigrant,
Hmm.
and he ends up in Harrisburg, and he gets married in the late 1800s. He's up there 18. So he was naturalized in 1876 in Baltimore, and then he's in Harrisburg by 1891 and married. And something happens to his wife. I found an obituary for a woman by that name, but it doesn't mention her husband or anything. So I'm not entirely sure it's her wife. But I think his wife died, and he ends up buying this land on the battlefield and becoming a hermit. And he lives in what they called a cave first. I found it. It's not quite a cave. It's more like a rock shelter. He didn't build it, but it's sort of a naturally formed rock shelter, just some boulders laying on top of other boulders. Um, when we found it, when Chad and I found it, um, I was pretty amazing because we went inside and you could see he had blocked up the cracks with stones, and we weren't entirely sure that was his cave. They were calling it until I walked around the other side, and there's still a chimney there, remnants of a chimney. So
Really?
yeah, he was in there. So we found that. We found his cabin on the battlefield. It was really amazing to me because we weren't sure when we went there. We weren't sure we were going to find it. We were looking around all day. It was a cold day in February, and we were just about getting ready to leave, and I literally said out loud, I just said, "Well, Hermit, I'm getting ready to leave. If you're going to show me something, now's the time." And I happened to look over just off the main part of the battlefield, and I saw an indentation in the ground that was very even looking. It looked like a square. And it was my friend John that was with me that time. I said, "John, does that look like a foundation to you?" He said, "It sure does." So we walked over to it, and sure enough, it was the remnants of a foundation. And the one detail of the newspaper article it said he had a hand dug well right next to his house that he had built, and then it had burnt down a couple years after he died. So the things we look for were that well, which we found right away. That's still there, not even covered up. Hand dug wells, still has water in it all these years later. And we dug down in the foundation a little bit, and we found carbon. So we know it did burn down. Carbon doesn't go
Yeah.
away. So we know we found the right place there. So that was really neat. That was just like quite an adventure that day.
Interesting. Yeah, I
Yeah,
like I said, I had just heard the name and a few, and I didn't even know he's buried over at Evergreen.
yeah. I've reached out to them. I don't know if he has a tombstone or not. He left all of his money to the county in order that he be buried and have a headstone. And I've emailed them several times, and I can't get anybody to. I've looked for his headstone. I can't find it anywhere in there. But there's a
Hmm.
huge cemetery. you know so I've asked, and can't seem to get an answer from anybody as to, like, hey, can I get a map, or can anybody tell me where he is?
Have you been into the new building over there with the Adams County Historical Society about the battlefield?
The what's it called, the citizenry or whatever, yeah, it's a
Yeah.
great museum. Uh,
Isn't it
that's
neat?
Yeah, I love that museum.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It was a long time since they built any museums in Gettysburg, and some of them been closed up. But when they built that, it was kind of interesting. There's a lot of different stuff in there that you just don't really think about. It's more, I don't know. It's more history about the people that were living there
Yeah.
at the time of the battlefield of the battle, and what a lot of them went through. And I mean, that was harrowing enough. But
Oh yeah,
yeah, it's very interesting.
they did a heck of a job. That is
Yeah.
a really, really nice museum. Well worth it. If you go to Gettysburg, that's one of the places I recommend stopping by. It's well worth it.
Yeah, when I was there, they had just done the dedication, and Martin Sheen was actually there that day.
Oh, neat.
Yeah, and I've seen him up there. He comes back there a lot when have anniversaries, especially for the film when the Gettysburg film was released. But he's in town quite a bit.
Hmm.
And a couple of other people that were on in the cast do show
Yeah.
up there a lot of times. I mean the battlefield historical or whatever they call that that's on YouTube. They do a great job of detailing what had happened at Gettysburg and a few of the other battlefields here in the East. And yeah, they do show up on there once in a while. So anybody I forget what it's called. The Battlefield Trust, is that what it is? I
And
think that's
maybe.
what it's called. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this book is very enjoyable. I mean, there is a little bit of touch of paranormal in there. There's a little bit of, I guess, anecdotal. It may be something involved with the paranormal, but I guess for people that lived in the outdoors all the time and the stories and everything and what they ran into, I guess some of that stuff is really interesting, and they probably came up with a lot of different, or I saw a lot of different things.
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a few of them. They say their ghosts are around. A few of them claim to have power to tell the future in one way or another. Some better than others. One of them that was said he could tell the future, and he kept making predictions that didn't come true. It's pretty funny. That was the guy named Albion Clow. He called himself the world champion woman hater, um, which
I
was
saw that.
yeah, he was really just like, it sounds nasty, but it was really kind of a hook at the time. He just he could write songs and get popular on it stuff, and he actually kind of used that. It seems like to get dates with women. Women seem to like him quite a bit from all accounts that were in there. But towards the end of his life, he decides that he can predict the weather and predict the future. He predicts his own death, and he's off by 4 years. He lives 4 years beyond that, and they said he was awful at predicting the weather. So it's a funny guy.
Well, one thing I did want to mention about Herb Thomas, I didn't know he was a powwower.
Well, I'm not sure, but it certainly seems like it. Given
Yeah, it
given
does seem like he may have been.
given what, so he felt like he was being harassed by his neighbors, and they killed his cat. He said, and he went to town and he was talking to the sheriff, and he said, "Hey, if you don't stop these people, I'm going to put a spell on them." He said once he says I'm going to put a spell on, and another time he says I'm going to hypnotize him. And he goes back and he's so tormented that he ends up hanging himself. He commits suicide in his cabin there. But they find all around his cabin and even on his person these pieces of paper with "In hoc signo vinces" written on it, which is "In his name you shall conquer,"
Yeah.
um, which is commonly used in as a charm of protection in Christian folk magic. So, given that he was German and in this area, I think it's quite likely he was a powwow practitioner, like that. That's
Mm,
very powwow. The pieces of paper with kind of charms written on it like that.
exactly. Very interesting.
Hmm.
Well, folks, I tell you, if you want a nice long read of some really interesting stuff that isn't necessarily paranormal, I suggest you get the book. It's I have never minded the loneliness. Hermits and Their Stories by Timothy Renner. So you definitely need to get it. I was pleasantly surprised with it. Well written too. So congratulations on the book.
Thank you. And I think like just for me to promote it just a little bit, it's each chapter's on a different hermit, and you don't have to read it in one sitting. In one time. You can pick it up, read about a hermit, put it down, pick it up again, turn to whatever chapter you want, read about another hermit. You don't have to read it in order, and it's got photographs of almost every hermit I write about in there. Some of them, like the Gettysburg hermit, I couldn't find his photo, but it was such a neat
Oh,
story, I had to put it in there. But the rest of them, almost all of them. I think there's four hermits in the book I don't have photos of, but every other hermit I write about, you can actually see their photo. And I do my best illustrations I think I've done for any of my books so far. I'm really really happy with the illustrations. So um, I think it's kind of it's a thick book, but I think it's an easy read because you can read it piecemeal. You don't have to go chapter by chapter. You just pick out and read about the one you're interested in and
yeah.
put it down and choose another one later.
Well, I enjoy your books anyway, and the way the style you write and everything. And yeah, this is a very enjoyable book, so I recommend it. Highly recommend it, actually.
Thanks so much. Yeah, thank you.
So, you know, I know you've been pretty busy in the past year or so, and we
Oh
ran
yeah,
into each other a bit over at the Alba Twitch Festival. And you were telling me about your little adventure out in South Dakota. If you could kind of go over that,
yeah,
it's really bizarre and interesting what you came up with.
yeah. So I was invited by my friend Lucinda. She said, "Hey, they're having a Bigfoot flap on Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota there," and she's like, "I'm not sure what to do, as far as collecting the stories and what to do with them." And at some point, she's like, "I don't know who to take." And at some point, I said, "Listen, are you asking me to go there with you?" And she said, "Yeah." I said, "Oh, okay. Yes." The answer is yes. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity. So my buddy John and I and Lucinda met at Sioux Falls, and we flew into there and rented a car and drove down to Pine Ridge Reservation. On the way into the reservation, there were three owls in the middle of the road. I said, like one for each of us. It was almost like it was a film loop being played. It was an owl in the middle of the road, took off, flew to the right. Less than a minute later, there's an owl in the middle of the road, takes off, flies to the right. Less than a minute after that, there's an owl in the middle of the road, takes off and flies off to the right. So that was our greeting, our welcome to the reservation.
Did you take it as a good sign or a bad sign?
Just a sign. I was like, we'll see what this means later.
Yeah,
It ended up being good, but yeah, I was like, uh-oh, this means something. But we'll
yeah.
see. So we had hosts, native hosts, because I recommend, like, if you're going to Pine Ridge, you probably should. There's some areas of Pine Ridge that are quite rough, and it was recommended to us that we have, native hosts, and we went with that certainly. The first day we were there, they were showing us around, and they live outside of the town of Pine Ridge, so this is out kind of in the hills, and they're driving us around through the hills, and it's just beautiful country, just absolutely beautiful, just rolling hills and ponderosa pines and meadows, and it's just great. And we came back, and I said, "Hey, do you mind if can we come back at night and like just drive up in the hills and hang out up there?" And they're like, "Absolutely, come back at night." So came back that night, and we're driving up into the hills. And during the day, they specifically said no one will be out here. They specifically said that, like, this is like no man's land. It's like, there's horses, wild horses, and people's horses, and there's some cattle out there. But otherwise, you're not going to see anybody out here, like nobody. So we're driving up, and we get up into the hills, and we're driving this ridge line, and there's a guy hiking, and he was he had, I think, 3 or 4 dogs with him that were following along behind him. And the first thing I noticed about him, and there was 5 of us in the car. The first thing all 5 of us noticed about the guy is he's using a walking stick that is about that big around and about 2 or 3 foot above his head. A ridiculous walking stick, and he's walking along with this walking stick. And I looked over at him, and I made a note because he was a white guy. At least I saw him as a white guy. We'll get to that in a bit. And he had my beard, like my facial hair. And I went, huh, he's got my beard. Drove by him, and our host says, I drove by him we went up about 100 yards. And my host says, we'll turn around and go back, because he was hiking about where we wanted to park. And I thought, like, maybe this isn't a good idea, because this guy's going to think we're coming back to do something to him. He's alone, and we're a car full of 5 people. So we come back, and he's gone. He's nowhere to be found. Now, of our hosts, it was a married couple. The male in the couple was the only skeptic I met the whole time I was there. He was the only person who's like, so we get out, and I'm like, hey, where'd that guy go? And he's like, oh, he went down that path there. And I said, yeah, but where is he? We should be able to see him. Like, later on, I timed it because we went back on the last day and I did that drive. I could see, because it's real sandy kind of soil, I could see exactly where we turned around. So I timed it. I had John get out and I drove up and I said, John, try to get lost in this amount of time. It's a minute up and back. We were literally a minute, and John tried. John was easily visible by the time I got back with the car. So this guy, if it was a guy, had to disappear himself and 3 or 4 dogs in less than a minute, completely out of sight when we're on top of a ridge line and we can see every direction. Seemed pretty sketchy to me, but whatever. We're up there, we're hanging out, and our host has a spotlight, and he's shining it through the field, and he shines it on something black in the field, and I kid you not, he hit that with the spotlight. I jumped back. I was like, what is that? His wife kind of let out a little squeal, and he says, "Oh, that's just an old car seat." And it didn't look like a car seat to me. I tell you, my first thought when that spotlight hit it is it was Mothman crouching in the field. It looked like some kind of winged entity, like crouching down. It was all black, and I was like, "What the heck is that?" But he knows the place, so he said, "Oh, that's just some old car seat someone left out there." So I thought, well, he must know. He lives here, right?
Yeah.
So I let it go. We hung out. The wind started picking up real heavy that night. The wind was really blowing hard. So we stayed up there for another hour and a half. I'm not sure. Went back. I go back to the hotel, and I have a dream that night. And everything is exactly the same in the dream. Driving up the hill, we see the hiker. I don't know if the dogs were in the dream, but saw the hiker. And I go up and I turn around and I come back. And on the way back, it's Bigfoot. And now the walking stick makes sense because it's the right size for Bigfoot, right? I was like, that was a weird dream. So I told that to John and Lucinda in the morning. Well, that day we're going out, and so what we're doing there is we're collecting Bigfoot stories from the people, and there wasn't one person there who didn't have a Bigfoot story, except for,
Mm.
like I said, our one host who was a skeptic, but his wife had plenty of Bigfoot stories. Everybody there has a Bigfoot story. It's wonderful. When Lucinda said they're having a flap, I don't know if she understood. I think they're always having a flap there. Bigfoot is a reality there. They talk about it not as something surprising, but something that is. It's just it's there. There's no question to them. So I'm going to collect Bigfoot stories from another woman, and she had been married to a very prominent medicine man of the Lakota, and he's passed, but she was his wife. So I walk in, and the first thing she says to me is, "So you're interested in Bigfoot?" I said, "Yeah," and she said, "Oh, you kind of look like Bigfoot." Interesting thing to say. File that away. So collect her stories, and at the end she says, "Have you seen Bigfoot?" And I said, I've seen big things move real quickly in the woods, things that I think are too big for Pennsylvania woods, but I can't tell you it's Bigfoot, and I'm not going to tell you until I get that it steps out in front of me and I can tell you for sure that's what I saw. I'm never going to I'll say I saw something and I'll describe what I saw, big and hairy, but did I get a good look at it? No, I didn't. So I can't say exactly what I saw. So until I get that, I can't say that I've seen Bigfoot. So I tell her this, and she said, "Well, have you considered asking him?" I'm like, "What?" She's like, "Yeah, ask him. Just ask him. Say, ask if you can see him. It might work." And I said, "Well, I haven't, but I tell you what, I will. I will do that." So a couple of days go by. Again, we're collecting stories all over the place, and we had an event for the community. We bought the food, and they made fry bread tacos and everything. It was just a wonderful day, and they taught us how to put up a teepee in a traditional way. Once in a lifetime experience, completely moving. The people were incredibly nice, just in sharing their stories and just in general, just sharing everything with us. I had a wonderful time. And after we get the teepee set up, they said to us, "Hey, you built this teepee. You want to spend the night in it? You're welcome to." So, well, heck yeah, right? I'm not. When am I going to get a chance to do that? So we come back that night, and we're hanging out, and we walked around a little bit, and I kind of went off by myself. and I'm staring at the hill, and one of the locals had given me this great story earlier in the day about being paced down the hill I'm looking at, sort of a hill in the distance. Like I was walking down that hill, I was paced by Bigfoot, and it's a great, amazing story. So I'm kind of looking off at that hill, and I'm thinking, and I'm thinking to myself, and I'm saying, I'm ready to see you now. I actually said that out loud, and then I realized I didn't ask. Right? So I rephrased it. I said, could I see you? And I had, this is not mind speak, but I call it heart speak because I didn't hear a voice, but I had this like feeling of an answer come immediately into me, and it was, you already have. I don't know
Hmm.
what that means. I don't know what that means. However, the last day we were there, we all went back up to the place where we saw that hiker. And I said, that's when I timed it, and it was just a minute up and back from where we saw him. And then I started asking people, what do you remember about him? So there were five of us in the car: John, me, Lucinda, and our two hosts. And everybody agreed on the walking stick. Everybody agreed on the dogs. But when it came down to details on him, uh, John said the guy looked over at him and stared him right in the eyes as we passed in the car. Lucinda said, I think John said his race was indeterminable, like he couldn't determine what race he was. Lucinda said he looked like a white guy, but he looked like an old hippie from California and had a full beard, not my facial hair, and was wearing sunglasses. She kept calling him Joe Cool. John didn't see sunglasses. John saw, stared right into his eyes. Our host said he looked Hispanic to them. So none of us can agree on the details of what this fellow looked like, other than he's wearing a hoodie, had a walking stick, and a backpack. That's it. Everybody else saw something different when it came to this, his face, the
Yeah.
person. So we get out, and our host just gets out of the car and just starts almost running through the field, determined to find any evidence of where this guy went. He's going to debunk this thing. And he's saying, well, that might be a footprint, and that might be a footprint. And he's going so fast, I can't even keep up with him. So at some point, I just quit, because by the time I get there, not only there's his footprints, and John's faster than me, so there's John's footprints, and then by the time I get there, there may be three sets of footprints plus this guy. It's like, to me, I'm like, I keep telling the host, like, it's not where he went, it's how fast he got there. We should have been able to see him. It's not where he went, it's how fast he got there. So I give up following the guy, and I just start walking through the field, because this is my last day on the reservation. I just want to enjoy it. I'm just walking around, just enjoying the beautiful scenery. And then it hits me. I called John over. I said, John, come here, come here, come here. John comes over. I said, look around. He's like, yeah. I said, look all around. I said, where are those car seats? And he says, they're not here. I said, darn right they're not here. And I called the host back, and I said, hey, where'd those car seats go? And nobody went back and cleaned this place up, by the way, because I was cleaning up, as we were there, I was cleaning up old beer cans and stuff. People had been
Yeah.
out there, in the past partying. So nobody came out and cleaned up anything. So he says, well, I don't know. They must have blown over in the wind. Well, that night we were there, it was so windy, way 10 times windier than any time we've been there. And so they were not there. Those car seats were, and I truly believe, like, I don't know what this guy was, a shapeshift. I don't know what it was, but the fact that we all couldn't have different opinions as to what he looked like, and that black thing in the field, like I said, it made me jump back, and it did not look like car seats to me. I this is crazy, but I think it was some kind of shapeshifter or something.
Yeah.
Like, and just because they weren't there, and when he hit the that black thing in the field with that spotlight, it made me jump. It really made me. I was like, "What is that?" I jumped back, and I'm like, "What the heck is that?" But it stayed still, you know. And he said car seats, so I thought, well, he knows what it is. So and so I don't know when she said to me, or when I got the answer rather, you already have. Did that mean that fella? Was that a shape changing Bigfoot? Was it some kind of clue when she said you look like Bigfoot? Because I looked over at him and thought, oh, he's got my facial hair. Was that some kind of like weird clue? I don't know what any of that meant as far as, you already have, but it was such a neat experience. Just, the whole experience was so cool. Plus, on top of that, all the Bigfoot stories we collected. So some amazing
Yeah.
Bigfoot stories.
You know, and we've run across that with a lot of investigations, particularly with in Chicago with the winged humanoids. That everybody has their own perspective somehow of what they see,
Hmm.
and many times they're just completely different than anybody else. And I wonder if these creatures cause that somehow. I mean, are they able to? Are they able to show themselves to certain people, or do they allow certain aspects of them to be seen? I don't think I've ever asked you that before. What do you
Yeah,
think about that?
I have a real time example of two people seeing something different. That place we call Site 7, we can dependably go there and see strange lights. And
Mhm.
John, by the way, this is the first time he went out with me was to go to Site 7. It's somewhat near. It's kind of in between where we both live. And he said, "I want you to
Is
take
that
me
the
out there."
Cadorus? Is that the Cadorus site there?
No, this is I'll tell you where it is off air. I just don't
Okay.
want to publicize it because it's
Okay.
private land. But John says, he was a complete skeptic. He said, "I'll tell you what those lights are if you take me there." I said, "Fine." I said, "If you can explain it, I'm not afraid of being debunked. I mean, if you can explain what they are, let's do it." So we hiked up. Usually for this place, there's a place we can drive in and park, and we kind of look into the woods, and that's where we see the lights. But for some reason, this night we decided to hike in from the river. It's near the Susquehanna, and
Mhm.
we hike up the mountain and during the day and waited until it got dark. And we sat there amongst the place where we usually see the lights. And I thought this is going to be scary because there have been times where it's gotten, even we just parked and looking into the woods, where it's gotten pretty rough, pretty scary, where people are like, "Yeah, I think we should go." So I thought this is going to be scary. What wasn't? It seemed very playful. The lights were like coming out of the woods almost to investigate us. And John at first is like, "I think I see lights." I said, "No, John, don't even do that to yourself. Wait, you'll know when you see them. Like you'll know." And eventually they start coming. He's like, "Wow," and he's literally saying, "I don't know what these are. I don't know what these are." I said, "Well, I told you." And at one point, they came so close to us. John was kneeling down on the ground trying to grab one. That it was that close to us. I was about 6 or 8 feet to his left, and I'm looking at what I assume was the same light because I saw him reaching for it. And for some reason, I said, "John, what did you see?" And he said, "I saw like a ping pong ball, golf ball sized orb of light." That's not what I saw. I saw like a pin of light, just like a
Mhm.
dot of light. That's all I saw. It was a light. It was definitely there. But so here we are looking at. I'm sure it was the same light because I saw him reaching for it, and
Yeah.
when we and seeing two different things. We literally just saw two different things. So I don't know what that is. I think sometimes I don't know. Is there a part of us? Is the co-creation theory, and then we're bringing something to it, and then it's manifesting. Using part of our creative brain. I don't know. I do not know.
I think they have an ability to manipulate us to a degree, but
Mm-hmm.
like I said, all the things. Well, and, as long as I've been doing this, I hear all kinds of stuff that makes you believe that, man, these things are able to not necessarily shapeshift, but they're able to manipulate what you're actually perceiving,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think that's true for um wow. You Yeah, you've told me some stories about that location before, and I know you've seen a lot of things, and and we've had a lot of stories. We've had the Mothman story up there on which road was that? That was up
Oh,
there by
Cador's Furnace Road. Yeah.
yeah, Cador's Furnace Road, and we've had Bigfoot sightings around it. I mean, not big necessarily Bigfoot, but we had a lot of winged humanoid sightings around this area too.
Hmm.
So wow.
Yeah, I've been
There-
getting just picking up from Facebook groups, and one person came to me, and another person came to a friend of mine. Those rakes are pale crawlers all
mm,
around that same area lately.
is that right?
Yeah, about the past year or two, there's been 3 stories of people who've seen those things in there.
I guess the closest one that I've had here was probably in South York. Um, what area is that? It's below the hospital. It's south of the hospital. But
Hmm.
I have heard. I had an account of someone who swear they saw, a pale humanoid or a crawler or whatever you want to call those things.
Yeah, yeah,
We don't get many of those around here, but we do get occasionally get something that kind of makes you think there is something out there.
yeah.
We get a lot of them in Pennsylvania, but not necessarily in this area.
Yeah, around this place, it's strange because one of the first sort of legend folklore things I collected about that area, Site 7, was some guy told me that a family of people with albinism live there,
Hmm.
and which is a
That'll get you
common,
thinking.
well, that's a common sort of urban legend for a lot
Yeah.
of places. Abandoned roads and stuff. They will talk about these. But he also told me he said there's hobos. He called them. There's hobos in the woods that throw stones at you. And I said, well, wait a minute. I said, have you seen these hobos? He said, no, I've never seen them, but they'll throw stones at you while you're there. I was like, okay, hold on a minute here. Like that sounds like something else to me. So it was after he told me those stories that we started going out there. But then when I started talking to other people who had experiences there, there's an amazing number of people who said they've seen white or gray things out there, including one woman said she saw literally like a gray alien walk behind her car when she was parked out there. But other people are seeing, talking about like white hairy things. Somebody saw a white. They described it as kind of like a weasel, but giant, like a giant weasel in there, but it was white. Um, Rick Fisher took a photo of an albino deer. He happened to be driving by there and saw an albino deer
Oh,
and
really?
he took a picture of that. And so it's like so many, and then we get these pale crawler reports all around the place. And it's like,
Huh.
it's odd. It's like, why so many white things? Like, especially when the first legend I heard was about this family with albinism. It's very interesting how many people are reporting white or light gray things in there.
Wow. Yeah, we got to get out.
Yeah, yeah. It's
I
a
still
fun
want to go
place.
down to Fork. I still want to go down to Fork State Park and check into that cryptid canine report that the woman gave me.
Oh
But
yeah.
yeah, I mean, but that wasn't the first time they've been seen down there. I mean,
Hmm.
I know. I mean, even around your area, around oh god, what's that? On the other side of 83, basically they had the railroad stations or whatever that was there. But there was apparently some cryptid canine sightings down there. I've heard a lot of different things, but of course we hear a lot of things. And you and me and Chad went down to was down Harford County down to what is that, Port Tobacco?
Hmm.
Yeah, and we checked that place out down there. That was a strange place. I haven't heard from her. The last time I talked to her was when I got the UFO um, video. But I haven't heard anything else has happened down there, so I
Well,
don't know.
I tell you what, that place that day, at first I was like, I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
know. And then I started dousing, and I'll tell you, I have never had a
I
dowsing
forgot
rod
about that.
break in my hands. It pulled down so hard. I wasn't doing anything. And it broke off in my hands. I was just sitting, and it pulled down and snapped. Now I've heard of that for other dowsers, but it's never happened to me. And I left impressed. I was like, well, is there something there? Because Chad has a very good sense for this stuff, and you can actually, it's almost like Spidey sense. You can see the hair on his arms raise up. he'll start saying like it went this way, and darn if the dowsing rods weren't like I'm following him along, and the dowsing rod's pulling down, pulling down, pulling down, and then he gets to this one spot, and he's like, "Oh, I really feel it here," and the hair on his arms standing up, and I walk over with that dowsing rod, and it just snapped. It was a stick, I wasn't using copper ones. I like using sticks, and I'm holding this stick, and it just snaps, breaks right in half. I've never had that happen, so there's something happening there.
Marla said it was Cecil County. Yeah, it is Cecil County. It's on the other side of the river. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That place did have some strange energy to it. It was weird. It was weird. But yeah, when you came back up and told me about the dowsing stick, I thought, oh God, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
it just seemed like there was a lot of death there. That's what it felt like to me.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, of course,
Let
it's
alone there
across
was a
from that
cemetery
cemetery.
across the street, but it
Yeah.
just seemed like there was a lot of death there.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, and again, I wasn't. I'm like, well, how much is she seeing? Like, because that cemetery was filled with artificial lights.
Yeah,
And I thought some of her, but then she sent you that UFO. Was it a video? Yeah, it was a video she sent, not a
video.
photo. It was a video, and I was like, well, I don't know what that is. I have no clue what that is. And yeah, yeah. So
And it sat there for, well, she took a 6 or 7 minute video, and it was a damn bright light. It was just there at the treetops.
hmm
So I don't know what, and the direction that was going in the direction of the river.
right.
It was looking east, but I don't know what she saw
Yeah, yeah.
or videotaped or recorded.
Yeah, we should
Uh,
check in and see if they've had anything else happen.
yeah, I might have to get a hold of her again. I know they were remember they were supposed to go down to Texas, but that trip got canceled for some reason. Something happened, so I don't know if everything's good there yet or not. But I got to
Mm.
check into it. Hey, folks in the chat, if you got questions, put them up there for Tim. And if you got any questions about any investigations and some of the weird stuff we've been running into around here, yeah, all questions in caps. I mean, we can go over. You can go over an hour, can't you?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah,
Yeah, a little bit. Okay, good.
yeah.
So, yeah, but yeah, we need to get out and I know Chad's out all the time. Have you guys been up to Me Show lately?
I have.
Oh, okay.
There's a certain place there called Pond Bank, which I got a recording. Very odd. A guy took me around, and he was showing me these places he had Bigfoot encounters around that area. And he took me there first because he says, I know you like the Bigfoot woman in white connection. There's a story about the White Lady Pond Bank, who supposedly drowned her baby in the pond there. And he's telling me this story, and I'm recording him, and I didn't hear it. And I went back to edit the interview for the podcast, and the entire time underneath of us, it sounds like Tuvan throat singing. If you're familiar with that, just very low, just but lower than I can get, the whole time throughout. And I was like, "What the heck is that?" Unfortunately, I was only able to capture about 2 or 3 seconds of it when we weren't talking. But it's underneath the entire interview. You can hear it the whole time. Now, I didn't hear it live. I didn't hear it when we were there. Went back. It was, I think, the week before last. I've been there a bunch of times since. I always record because I hope to capture this, like capture gold.
Yeah.
Lightning in a bottle. I hope to get it again. Nothing ever since. Not at least nothing that impressive. But the last time we were there, I actually bought a mic that records underwater. That's more for music. I just wanted to record some neat nature sounds and stuff. But while we were recording underwater, we had another recorder running rather that was outside of the water, and darn if we didn't capture chanting this time. It's really really neat sounding, and it was again we didn't hear it when we were there. We but it's weird chanting. It's not quite as low as that other. Like I said, it sounded like Tuvan throat singing, but it's a low chanting with a definite melody to it. So interesting.
Let's see. Jose Sanchez says, was the hairy weasel canine in nature could be younger dung man.
The drawing that the person made for me looked like a weasel. They said it just looked like a giant weasel. So, and it was on all fours. I think they said it was 4 or 5 feet long, something like that. body, not, that with the tail would have been longer than that.
Mm.
So, who knows what it was, but it was on all fours, and they very much described weasel.
Dagnabbit asks, do you think there are more than 100 Bigfoot out there in North America?
Well, I'm probably not the guy to ask that question because I don't think there's a breeding population of them. I don't look at Bigfoot that way. I think Bigfoot is some kind of, and this is my theory right now. I'll change eventually, probably. Allow me to change as I get more information and more opinions. But right now, my feeling is that Bigfoot is some kind of spirit.
Yeah.
But I could be. I look. I could be wrong.
I think for the most part they're supernatural. I really do. I mean, do I believe there may be breeding populations in certain areas?
Hmm.
Not around here. I mean, but yeah, I agree with you on that. And there's definitely supernatural aspects too. I think there's supernatural aspects to all cryptids for the
Yeah,
most part.
for the most part. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions, folks? Jose Sanchez, in what area were the crawlers seen?
Um, so it's around this area we call Site 7. Again, it's private property, so I don't like to advertise where it is. That's why we gave it that code name. Generally, we'll say near the river, Hellam-ish area. Let's say that.
Okay. Well, I know what you're talking about.
Mhm.
East of the Susquehanna River in York County.
Yeah, yeah.
Or west of the Susquehanna
Right,
River in York County.
right. Eastern York County, west of the river, but yeah,
Yeah.
right along the river. Though we'll say that it's walking distance from the river.
Jose Sanchez, also, could the weather conditions affect how the crawlers, Bigfoot, and Mothman might show up more or less? I've never really thought that the weather played a big part into any of this. I did early on, but I
Yeah,
tell you,
it's
all the Chicago investigation changed my mind on that.
it's just all over the place. That's the
Yeah.
thing. It like day, night, rain, snow, sun. Like you get reports all the time. So
Any other questions, folks? I see one up there says, "Were you guys talking about Pennsylvania?" Yeah, I mean South Central Pennsylvania for the most part.
yeah, yeah. Of course, when I was talking about the reservation, that was up at Pine Ridge in
That
South
was
Dakota.
South Dakota, right?
Yeah.
I got to get out there sometime. I've been invited to go to a few places out there. So many reservations. It's so many,
Oh, it's
Redbud. I hear so many stories come out of Redbud. It's ridiculous.
yeah. I have a friend on the Blackfoot Reservation in Montana, and his stories are just incredible, incredible. And he told me, he said, come here. He said, you'll get stories like this all day long. Just one after another. It's just amazing, amazing stories. I was very lucky to be invited to Pine Ridge. I feel very, very lucky to have done that.
Yeah, it sounds pretty cool. Well, anyway, we're going to go ahead and cut it loose here. And hey, thanks for coming on, uh, Timothy. I hope you do well with the book.
Well, thank
I
you.
heard a few people talk about it, and I think it's an enjoyable read. So, folks, if you're listening to me, go out and get it. Again, it's I have never minded the loneliness, hermits and their stories by Timothy Renner. It's a really interesting read.
And you can
So,
get it
Tim,
wherever
I want
books
to
are. Wherever you get
absolutely.
books, you can get it there. So
So, Tim, thanks for coming on tonight, and we're gonna have to hook up a little more often than what we do. And
absolutely, we're too close not to.
that's true. We're right down
Yeah,
the road from each other.
yeah,
So,
exactly.
you have a good evening, and I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thanks so much.
Take care. And I want to thank each and all you for watching and chatting. And if you donate, it's truly appreciated. And your support's what makes all this possible. So please like, subscribe, and share. If you have a sighting or encounter report that you'd like to be considered for either the personal report show or onto the blog, email me at lonstrickler@phantomsmonsters.com. So until we meet again next Friday night, stay healthy and have a safe and enjoyable weekend. Take care.